Hey guys, and welcome to part 7. In this part of the tutorial we are primarily going to add some haze to the background and then create some global lighting complete with sun rays to affect all of the image. At the end we will do some quick colour tweaks on the water. Firstly though, let's quickly give our water glow another boost to increase the effect further. Scroll down to the glow copy layer we created earlier. Currently the blend mode is set to soft light, but let's change this to overlay for a more pronounced effect and boost the opacity to 100. Next, let's collapse the groups to keep things organised, and now drill down into the elephant group to find the tentacles. I feel we can bring a tiny bit more shadow and highlight detail on the mid and front tentacles with the grey adjustment tints. Starting with the back group colour adjustment, double click the adjustment layer and command click the blend if grey underlying layer highlights handle and drag it just below halfway to the left to bleed some tentacle highlights through. Repeat this process with the colour adjustment layer clipped to the middle group, but this time also adjust the shadow handle to let some of the tentacles' darker tones bleed through. Collapse the groups again now and let's add some haze. In the background group, create a new layer above everything within the group and name it Haze. Set the layer to soft light and with a soft white brush with a low flow, 10% or less, paint gradually in the central region of the sky behind the octopus head and anywhere else you'd like some haze. This will essentially knock back the background and make the foreground subject pop a bit more. Let's do a bit of tidy up. Put the front water layer and its adjustments layer into its own group. I also want to darken the shadow we created where the tentacles meet the trunk a bit more, so find the exposure adjustment layer we created earlier to do this. It should be clipped to the tentacles group and reduce the exposure value to around -4. Onto the global lighting. Create a new group above everything else and name it Global Lighting and set its blend mode to soft light. To begin with, create a new adjustment layer within the group set to a dark bluish grey colour. This basically casts a bluish shadow over everything. Next, hide the group and create a new black and white adjustment layer above everything and set the preset to maximum black. Clip a curves adjustment layer to this. We now want to squash the maximum range between the darkest and lightest areas by bringing in the black and white point handles closer to the middle, around 25% of the way each. Now go into the Channels tab and command click on the RGB layer to make a selection of the highlights. Go back to your layer stack, hide the black and white adjustments layer and its curve, reveal the global lighting group and create a new group called highlights within this group. With the selection still visible, create a new solid colour adjustment layer in this folder. A layer mask of our selection of the highlights will already be applied. Reduce the opacity to around 50% to make the effect more subtle. Now for some sun rays. Create a new layer called Rays in the highlights group and using a sun rays brush, I am using one from Visuals of Julius's brush pack, set to white, paint once on the layer to create some sun rays in a position where you like. You can also do this manually with a soft white brush set to a very low flow. Reduce the opacity to around 75% and now let's transform this using scale and perspective to adjust it so it looks more like they are coming out of the gaps in the cloud. Lastly, let's create one more layer in the highlights group for some subtle glows. Using a soft white brush with a low flow, paint around on any areas you'd like to generally increase the brightness. I usually do roughly around the areas which are already quite bright, just to give the areas surrounding them a halo boost. I like to have the highlights not in pure white, so now we can create a new colour adjustment layer and clip it to the highlights group. Double click the swatch and pick a nice, very subtle, bright orangey yellow hue. If you haven't already, add a layer mask to the highlights group and with a soft black brush with low flow, paint any areas away which you don't want the highlights to affect. In this case, I have gone too bright on the left ear, so I want to reduce this a bit. You can experiment with selecting the elephant to restrict where you can paint. To finish up with the global lighting, let's try changing the blend mode to overlay and reduce the opacity a bit. This creates a slightly more pronounced effect than soft light, but is still not too strong. Let's delete the black and white adjustment layer and its curve. Our final job now is to tweak the colour of the water to make it a little more green, as I feel right now it's too blue. Open the back water group and select the hue and saturation adjustment layer we made earlier. Reduce the cyan saturation at small amounts, and then setting the drop down back to master, drag the middle handle slightly to the left to make the whole thing slightly greener. We have now nearly finished our artwork and it's looking pretty cool. In the next video we will do our final image mastering using camera raw filter on the whole image and some final tweaks with some adjustment layers to add some finishing touches.